All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Zoom panel, The Bee's Knees. My name is Kathleen Mitchell, and I am one of the many curators for the Sixth Festival Chicago. The festival is aimed at gathering, illuminating, and activating people to stand up against the climate emergency now. We are in our very first year this year, and even with the difficulties that COVID has challenged us with, we have over 20 events included in our programming, mostly on Zoom, but several in person, outside, and distanced. If you are interested in some of our more immediate programming, tonight at 7 p.m. Central Time, we have a Zoom event called Becoming God. This event centers around the tie between the climate crisis and the threat of nuclear weapons, and it will feature a performance as well as a discussion with Nobel-nominated peace activist Kathy Kelly. So again, that is tonight on Zoom at 7 p.m. Central Time, and if you go to the6fest.org, you can find registration information there. Tomorrow, if you are in the Chicagoland area, you can stop by The Plant on the south side for Vegan Paradise. It is a vegan's farmer's market, and you can shop to your heart's content and get all the vegan grocery items you could ever want or need. We will also be there at The Plant with more information on the festival. Before we get started, we want and need to acknowledge that Chicago, which is the home of the Sixth Festival, stands on the ancestral and present-day lands of the Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, Fox, Kickapoo, and Illinois nations. We recognize that the indigenous peoples of Chicago were the first and, in many ways, the last stewards of the land on which Chicago stands. We also recognize the inability of many of our own ancestors to settle in this region without the knowledge and support of the Native Americans, and we grieve the forced removal of these people and look forward to a future in which that relationship can be reconciled. So, without further ado, we are here today to have a conversation about bees, everyone's favorite pollinators, what they do, how they're connected to our ecosystem, and what is contributing to their disappearance and what that means for us as human beings. I apologize in advance for my masks. I am streaming in from a coffee shop today for better Wi-Fi, and so we got to keep the people around us safe. So I apologize that you cannot see my mouth. Joining us today, we have two fabulous experts on the subject. Firstly, we have John Weston Mitchell. He is zooming in from Vail, Colorado. John is a former assistant research scientist at SynTech in their Pollinator Risk Assessment Division, and his highest achievement is being my cousin. So congratulations to you on that, John. Secondly, we have Chicago's own Oscar Villa. Oscar is an urban beekeeper and the owner and founder of Bee-utiful Honey and Candles, which in just a moment, once we get started, I'll put the link in the chat. Oscar has some really beautiful products. I am the owner of several of these products, and he'll be telling us about his life as an urban beekeeper. So gentlemen, we're happy to have both of us with you today to give us your unique takes on this species and what people can do to help them thrive. So I think to get started, Oscar is out in the field right now with his bees. So Oscar, if you could show us just a little bit of your hive and maybe point out to us what we can see. Not many of us get the opportunity to see the hives up close in person.
Sure, Kathleen. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate in the fest. So I am in a house of a friend, and we have like 5 hives here, and we're gonna open one. And right now the bees are bringing a lot of pollen. Pollen is protein for them, so they're bringing yellow pollen. I don't know if you can see it, but that's the action. So we're gonna open a little hive and see what's going on here.
Oh, wow. There they are.
Yeah, there. So here,
Wow.
they're working like a bees, and we have the brood, and these are ready to hatch probably, and we have eggs around, and we have some bees, and everybody's busy working, so we are not gonna disturb them too much, but we have some with pollen here. Like I said, pollen is like protein. We have the drones here and the workers.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're a brave man to go in there with bare hands, Oscar.
They're not, the bees are not aggressive, but they are defensive. So if I'm stay too long, or if I am in a little late in the afternoon where the foragers came back, the older bees are a little bit more defensive than the younger bees. And so the good thing in Chicago, we don't have the how we call that, the bees that a little more aggressive than we have in the South, and in South America or in Mexico, or even in South of the United States. We don't have those aggressive bees, and so these are very nice bees, and they will sting, but they are not looking to sting nobody. They are just busy working.
Wow.
Guys,
well, thank you, Oscar. That's a great way to start off, just to see them up close in person. All right, so we are going to now go to John. John Weston has a lovely presentation prepared for us about some of the things that are threatening the bee population. So take it away, John.
Sweet. Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, so I put together a little PowerPoint here just to kind of touch on what is stressing out the bees. Let me get into my slideshow mode. All right. Yeah, so there's kind of, there's like three main things that are going on, and we have disease and parasites, which I'll hit on that first, mainly with a Varroa destructor, the Varroa mite. It's a parasitic mite that gets on the bees. I got some cool pictures of that for you. And pesticides. So in our pollinator risk assessment program, we would get contracts from the big 6 agricultural companies to test the new pesticides that were coming out. And these were to give us an idea of how lethal these pesticides could be to bees. And that was the majority of the focus of my work at my time at SynTech. And then I'll kind of lump monocultures and flowerless landscapes into one category as habitat. And you guys listening, kind of the best thing you guys can do if you're interested in helping the bees is, getting involved with habitat. And so this first slide here on the left, if you see those 2 brown guys on this drone pupa here, those are the Varroa mites. So proportionally, if you could imagine, the Varroa mite is about, it'd be like having a basketball-sized organism latched onto your liver, sucking out your blood and actually feeding on your liver. So originally we thought that the Varroa mites were only feeding on the hemolymph, which that is the kind of like the insect blood or bee blood, if you can imagine. But lately we've found that they're actually feeding on the fat bodies. And the fat bodies are molecules and tissue within the bee that they're important for protein acquisition, so with their digestion. and storing fat, and also they act as the liver to detoxify things from the environment. So when you have a mite like this feeding on those sources, it really kind of hinders these bees' ability to fight off things like viruses in the environment, recover from exposure to pesticides. It makes it harder for them to overwinter with their protein and fat storage. So this mite is, definitely a big problem for the bee industry. And thankfully, we have like a lot of people, looking at ways to mitigate it. And there are treatments out there that are successful with reducing these mites in the hive. During their larval cycle, so if you see that second step where the larva is resting in the bottom of the well, or the brood comb, that's when the mites will get in there and actually start feeding on the larva. And then they will feed throughout their pupation and reproduce actually inside the capped comb. So this is a picture right in the kind of top center there. You can see a bee that has been exposed to Varroa mite and has contracted deformed wing virus. That's I think there's about, I don't remember the exact number, but there's 20 plus viruses that these mites will transfer to bees. And when the bees are developing and they contract this virus, they get really stressed out and they'll actually emerge early. So just about every other bee in there is kind of a young nurse bee and has emerged at an appropriate time. But this bee that has contracted the deformed wing virus is actually, was stressed out while it was developing. So it emerged probably a day and a half earlier than it should have. So to treat for mites, a lot of beekeepers use oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is naturally found in rhubarb, carrots, and I believe strawberries and a bunch of other fruits and vegetables. And the way you apply it is through fumigation. So you can see in the bottom left corner there's a car battery. We hook that car battery up to a metal spoon. In that spoon, we put our powdered oxalic acid in. And then as that spoon heats up, it melts it and turns it into a vapor, exposing it to all the bees. And this doesn't hurt the bees if you use it in a limited or, kind of a regulated amount. There have been reports of people overusing it, and it kind of affects the bees' ability to navigate and communicate because it hurts their antenna. But applied in a moderate amount, it's a really good tool and super helpful for reducing those mite populations. What the industry needs to do and what they're working on is developing a mite-resistant bee. So what I mean by that is that's kind of a hygienic breed of bee that will actually, when it detects the mite, will attack it by biting it and kind of throwing it out of the hive. And then that way, you don't have to rely on fumigation techniques, which can really stress the bees out and lead to mite resistance, which is something that would be pretty detrimental to the industry. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about pesticides. In our lab, we had a couple different ways of investigating different compounds with bees. This one is one of my favorites. We actually would grow the bees in vitro, in vitro, so in test tubes, basically. And through different stages of larval development, we got to dose them with pesticides and see if this had an effect on their development. Another place you want to look for pesticides is how much those compounds show up in honey. this is one of my colleagues. We're actually scraping the cappings off of honey so we could extract it and send it to our analytical lab to look for our sponsor's test compound of interest. So, you know, like pesticides are affecting the bees, but we also don't want to see those pesticides ending up in large amounts of the honey because that's not great for humans either. This is a pretty fun study. This was out in California on the almond trees. So to test for pesticides in this way, we made these huge tented tunnels, and we would go into these tunnels and apply our compound of interest to the trees, and then bring a beehive into the tunnel to be exposed to that compound. So from this, we got tons of data. One, we were able to sample forager bees coming back in, see how much pesticide they were bringing back to the hive. We took samples from inside the hive. That was pollen, larvae, nectar, honey, wax, and propolis. And then, you know, once we had collected over those samples over certain time points, those get sent to an analytical lab. And then those hives actually got taken out of the tunnels, put into normal field settings where they were managed for, I think it was like 270 days after. And at certain time points, you're taking samples from the hive to see how that pesticide is degrading. Or hopefully you want to see the pesticides that's degrading. So kind of one of the things with pesticides is you want an effective pesticide that gets in, does its job, and then leaves the environment. So that's why you would take certain time points to see how long those residues are staying around. This is a photo from inside the tunnels with our beehive. And so now I'll talk a little bit about habitat. And this is an aerial photo of those almond trees you saw earlier. And this, you know, this is a classic example of monoculture, where all you can see for miles and miles is one type of plant species or one foraging opportunity for bees. So there's about 3 weeks in February where these flowers are blooming, and bees from all over the country, about 1.5 million bees, are brought to the Central Valley of California to pollinate these almonds. And once the almonds are pollinated, the bees have to be trucked back out to either go pollinate other crops like canola and alfalfa. Most of that is done up in North and South Dakota, or they'll go to kind of like their overwintering, overyearing apiaries, which are typically commercially in Texas and the southern United States. So the problem with this is if you had a colony stay in this monoculture for 1 year or through all 4 seasons, there wouldn't be enough flowers around blooming for that hive to sustain itself. And that's why the bees have to be trekked in and out. So, you know, kind of an ideal thing for a, you know, full year-round apiary is a type of situation where you have many species of flowers and many different habitat types. These are actually photos from a site in Arkansas that was doing prairie restoration for, let's see, it was for bobwhite quail. Yeah, so they were kind of remedying the habitat from row crops and I believe it was cow pasture to bring it back to more of a native prairie situation. And these, you know, ideally, and this works for quail and for bees, which is kind of great. You know, you get interest with your conservation for bees as well as your conservation groups for upland game or upland birds. And what you'll see here is just in this one photo is 4 different types of habitat. You have this buffer from the road, you have a row crop in the middle, that black area in the very center is, this is in February, so they just did their grass burns. That's gonna be your native grasses and your native flowers. And in that buffer, you're gonna have a lot of non-natives, probably, but they're gonna be flowering weeds, so, or flowering plants, and that's good. And then of course you see the trees, and forests will actually hold quite a bit of floral diversity, especially with oak and maple. Those are great early season resources for bees. So yeah, oh, and then bringing it back to what you guys can do, you know, Kathleen, maybe I can send you a link or something for some good pollinator mixes. And if you've ever thought about doing a pollinator garden in your yard, you know, there's some great perennial wildflowers that you can plant that are like super low maintenance, and you pretty much, you know, once you get them established, you can walk away and they'll come back every year, and you'll have, you know, beautiful poppies, echinacea, yarrow, you know, all kinds of like cool flowers like that. So that's the end there.
Wow. Well, thanks so much, John. That was really, really informative. Much more information than I could ever have fathomed was affecting just one species. Now, I have a couple of questions for you. And yeah, John, if you want to drop that link into the chat, you'll just have to turn it to panelists and attendees, not just panelists, and then everyone who's with us can see that pollinator mix you were talking about. So I have a couple questions just based off what you just said. Are there any pesticides that are commercially available, you know, for people's gardens or whatnot that people should avoid or maybe try to lean towards, just in terms of what's healthy for bees? Or if they're commercially available, are they just all considered non-harmful?
No, that's not entirely true. So the first one that comes to mind is glyphosate, which is Roundup. So I mean, like,
Roundup.
yeah, and I mean Roundup, I don't know if that actually, you know, affects the bees per se, but if you're spraying, you know, all the dandelions in your yard, that's definitely taking away, you know, some nectar and pollen sources for bees. So, I mean, you know, there's this whole kind of idea of the perfect lawn, and you know, it's all grass and there's no weeds. But you know, if the weeds flower, I mean, I don't know, maybe I need to take my sandals off more, but like, if it's flowering weeds, I mean, what's the problem with it, you know?
Right.
So,
That's really
I mean, just like, yeah. And you know, as far as like weed control for your gardens and stuff, you know, pre-emergence probably fine, but you know, beyond that, just enjoy pulling them out by hand, you know. Or I do.
the zen of weeding.
Yeah, exactly. Always
Awesome.
something to do.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you is, because you mentioned that something people could do to help the health of bees was to get involved in habitat reconstruction. Do you have any, you know, tips on how to go about that, where to look for opportunities for habitat reconstruction?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're in Kansas City, I know KC Wildlands. They do some cool work. I can't really speak to Chicago, but I'm sure if you did some digging online, you could kind of figure out where, you know, you can go volunteer to kind of help with that. And then of course, I mean, you know, habitat, we have this idea, oh, it's got to be a park with acreage, but I mean, really just, you know, if you put some perennial beds in along your fence line at home, or, you know, flower boxes are super cool. And there's all these flowers that are specific to honeybees, but they're going to bring in other cool stuff like monarchs and hummingbirds and other stuff like that. So, pollinator gardens are pretty cool as far as something that an individual can do.
Cool. And then I had one more question for you. So I thought that was really interesting what you were talking about, especially with the almond monoculture fields with the relocation of the bees and being trucked around. Does that relocation and transportation put any additional strain on the bees themselves?
Yeah, it does stress them out. I will say I've transported bees myself, and it's actually, they take to it surprisingly well, so long as you close the hives up at night and drive through the night to your destination. It's kind of like, they're just asleep. Obviously you can't do it when it's 95 degrees out. You got to do it at kind of lower temperatures. So yes, it does stress them out, but they're actually surprisingly ready to be transported. Yeah.
Cool. Well, John, thank you so much. That was, just a really, really amazing perspective that I think a lot of us don't get to hear from very often. So thank you so much for putting the time into that presentation. That was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. And John, we'll be, asking you a few more questions here at the end, but now I want to kind of shift our focus to Mr. Oscar Villa, who, just to remind you guys, Oscar is an urban beekeeper in Chicago, and he is the owner of Bee-utiful Honey and Candles, which I have dropped a link to in the chat. Really beautiful products. Like I said, I own several, would highly recommend. So yeah, Oscar, thank you so much again for being with us and for showing us your hives there at the beginning. And I would just love to hear your story. I mean, we hear about beekeepers all the time, but I don't know if everyone is super familiar with the idea of an urban beekeeper. So we would love to hear, what that experience has been like for you.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. So we started with my wife Jess like 8 years ago, and it was in 2013 that Advocates for Urban Agriculture here in Chicago, they made Urban Lifestyle Expo, and we went to their expo in 2013, and I told my wife, well, we live in an apartment, so I told my wife, let's get chickens for my mom's house. And my wife says, the chickens in the winter, maybe they're gonna die. So I said, okay. So we went to a tour. Caroline Yoder is a person in Chicago who involved with urban livestock. She took us in a tour, and we saw people in Chicago who had goats or chickens or rabbits or bees. And one gear says she has bees in the rooftop or her friend's house in the third floor. And I said, okay. And I said, how much honey did you get last year? And she said she got 70 pounds. And in my mind, I make 70 by $10, $700. And I said, oh, let's get that business. but after, so that day, I just ordered my bees from a booth stand, and a couple months later, because it was in February, in April, they called me, because in April, they come the bees from Texas, Georgia, and California. And after the pollination of the almonds, and they called me in April and said, your bees are here. I said, okay, I know what I do with that. And that was 8 years ago. And after 3 years, almost I quit because they keep dying, because like John said, the mites kill the bees. The bees in Chicago, they have to be strong, healthy, and with a lot of food to survive the winter. And the mites are a very bad problem. And of course, the pesticides too. But in Chicago, we are a little better because in Chicago, the people, we don't have the agriculture pesticides because we are in the city. And so in the city could be a good place to have bees. And we don't have the, like I said before, our bees here are nice. They are not aggressive. That's how we started. And in 2019, I think I was a little more serious and tried to learn wherever I can. And we produced 300 pounds of honey. And I said, oh my God, what do I do with this? It's a problem, you know, and what am I gonna do with this? And a farmer, Renee Randall, then she's a farmer and she sells veggies in a farmer. And we bought a CSA from her. And she told me to come and sell the honey with her in the farmers market. So in 2019, I sold the honey there and I sold all the 300 pounds. And 2020, COVID came, so we invest a little heavier. We have from 5 hives, we went to, from those 5 hives, only one survived the winter. In 2020, we invest in 40 hives and we produced 1,700 pounds of honey. So 1,700 pounds of honey. And we sold it in the farmers market. And because people like local honey, good honey, you know, and now we're trying to increase a little more. We started doing candles at the end of the year in 2019 because we ran out of honey. And so it's okay. We started doing candles, and they sell good, and especially in Christmas. The candles. Yeah, and the honeybees are very important for us because for pollination. But I would like to say that the native bees are very important too because we have because the honeybees came from Europe, and so like me, we're immigrants, and but the native bees, we have like 4,000 native bees in North America, and 70% they nest, they overwinter underground. So we have to take care of the native bees too because they are important. Honeybees just go to flowers with a high content of sugar, and if we don't have honeybees, they cannot have the almonds in California because they don't have native bees because to have the production they put pesticides, insecticides, so they have to bring almost 2 million beehives to California. But the native bees are important. Otherwise, we're gonna be pollinating with honeybees, or we're gonna pollinate it by hand, like in China they do. Anyway, I want to show you. We are in a house of my friend, and she has these. I don't know if you can see it, but she has this piece of wood with a lot of holes.
Oh,
and
wow.
this is a house for native bees. I think carpenter bees, or I don't know exactly what kind of bees. But there's a lot of cocoons here. I guess they're gonna born. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know if I think some people didn't see the bees. I can open another hive to see it again if you want.
Yeah, please do. I think we did have a couple of glitches in the video. So if you want to show those again, that would be amazing.
Okay, let's open it. We have 5 hives here in Chicago. You can have 5 hives per house. So the state promotes that because the pollination, bees are important for pollination. The most important thing of bees is not the honey. The honey is good, but the most important thing is pollination. Einstein said, without bees, the humanity will last 3 years. So we need bees to pollinate
Oh,
food.
Lordy.
Yeah, we need bees to, and not only the honeybees, you know, all the bees, native bees are super important. Because honeybees just go to high content of sugar. You're never going to see a honeybee in a tomato. You know, the bumblebees, I think, are the best. And I don't know. Let's open one box. So these boxes, they overwinter, and we're gonna go to the second box because in the third box is not much. So this is a small hive. Let me put some. So always we should use a bale, but I'm not using a bale because it's not a small, it's a big colony. So
Is it showing on there?
what is showing? We have honey here. I think, yeah, you a little more down over there. We have honey here.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And it's a spring honey from last year. Spring honey is clear. Fall honey is a little darker. We're gonna open one more. Well, we're gonna take this spring. So we have some honey here, and we have some eggs here. I don't know if you can see it, but these are drone cells. The cells are a little bigger. And
It's so amazing to see up close.
yeah, like I said, they are defensive, but they are not aggressive, and that's the good thing we have it. We don't have the aggressive bees here yet. Hopefully, we have it. We will. Anyway, we're gonna close now.
Okay, here we go.
So, Oscar, I'd love to ask you, because you talked about how the honeybees are, you know, an introduced species in the Americas, and how native bees are equally as important to preserving as the honeybee is. Are there different methods that people use in terms of preservation for native species?
I think what we can do is, you know, nature. We have to try to conserve nature, because once the nature is destroyed, I want to be positive, yeah, but like in Chicago, we have raised beds. Why? Because the soil is polluted already with lead, with arsenic. So we cannot use that soil because, you know, our vegetables, they're going to be they're not going to be, they're going to be traces of heavy metals. So we have to try to conserve the nature because we are nature. And I see and so what we can do is, okay, try to minimize the pesticides, herbicides. You know, I know we need sometimes to put it, but we can minimize that. We can, you know, 70% of the native bees nest overwinter underground. So don't disturb the soil until the temperature is like 50 degrees, so they have time to get out from the soil and things like that. Like John says, try to have a it's dandelions. They're not so bad. They're nice. I know sometimes we want to have a green lawn, but you know, dandelions are good, and you know what this means? Side is like dead. So homicide is dead. Pesticides is dead. You know, herbicides is herb to dead, insect to dead. You know, so we should choose life, no side. Like John says, we can weed with hands. You know, I know, and you know, and like I'm wearing this hat, Organic Valley, and let's try to keep Did you try the food, organic food? Did you try the organic meal? It tastes much better than, the organic is good. So I know it's expensive, but it's better food and better for us. That's it.
That's great. Well, I feel like one of my biggest takeaways from this whole thing is going to be that dandelions are not bad. Dandelions equal good.
Yeah.
Well, I know you said that there were a few things about Chicago that actually made your beekeeping maybe easier or some plus sides to being in Chicago for your hives. Are there any, unique challenges to the Chicago area that get posed on your hives?
I think the bees, they need nature, so they need flowers, they need trees. So we have a lot of trees in Chicago. We have the linden tree that produce a lot of nectar. We have which is basswood, linden is basswood. We have the black locust. We have a lot of trees. We have maples. We have a lot of trees that produce a lot of good honey, and that's good. But which is good. We produce good honey in Chicago, and it's delicious honey, but we don't have fall honey. So we produce spring and summer honey, but fall honey we need some more native plants like goldenrod and asters to produce the fall honey. Yeah. And like I said, we have good bees. So, and the state, we can have 5 bees in the houses. So, and they are not mean bees, and so I think it's a good place to have bees in Chicago. But more nature is better. But the bees will travel like 3 miles around, which is a lot, to forage it. Nectar, pollen, water. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, that all of this has just been so enlightening. I have a question that I want to ask both of you, John and Oscar. And one of the questions I had for you was, what can the average non-beekeeper, non-pollinator scientist do to help the honeybee? But I think we've kind of addressed that already in terms of, habitat reconstruction and planting native species and stuff like that. So I guess what I want to ask you guys, and I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on this, is what are we risking by not preserving these species? And Oscar, I'll go ahead and let you.
Well, once the good thing is nature is so huge. So the world is so huge, but so small too. So nature is big, and the damage we can do, probably it can bounce back until. But if something is extinct, it's extinct. If some kind of bee is extinct, that's it. And but nature is pretty good. Like I said, I saw signs like save the bees. Yeah, but we're saving ourselves. Like we have to conserve our house. We have to clean our house, take care of our house, because another thing is people said, okay, that's herb, that's weeds are bad. We're gonna put this to kill the weeds, or we're gonna put these insecticides to kill those insects that they are not good for us. But okay, how we can think that that's bad for the plants and those bad for the insects, but they are good for me? It's like, and we are nature, so if they are bad for them, probably it's bad for me too. Yeah, we have to try to conserve and try to keep the trees, try to keep the nature, and try to keep it clean, keep the water clean, keep the soil clean, as in our own yard. You know, it's like, and more nature is better because we are nature.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, John, just to remind you what the question was, what are we risking by not valuing the conservation of bees?
Well, kind of on a personal note, you know, I think beekeeping as a hobby or just a general practice is like, you know, great to teach the youth. Just, you know, there's so many, you know, different facets to what goes into managing a hive, and I actually think there's a great educational opportunity there for young people. You know, everything from kind of getting over your fears of interacting with the bees to learning some responsibility, and also, you know, if you're someone in the urban core and maybe feeling a little detached from nature, you know, having a beehive to go to kind of help you tune into seasonal changes is something that I think would be pretty valuable. And then, of course, you know, they pollinate a third of our favorite fruits and vegetables, so there's that. But you know, one thing that I find peace in is there's no way we can afford to lose the bees, and so we're not going to. Like, it's going to get figured out. Just hopefully through, like Oscar was saying, you know, more organic methods and methods that are less impactful on the environment. Yeah, another thing I would say, we've already talked about pollinator gardens and stuff, but you know, if you've ever tried vegetable gardening, you know, you know, growing up, we always had an awesome vegetable garden, and you know, moving out and since graduating, you know, I move about once a year, so I don't kind of have that yard where I can build a garden, but you know, I always try and do tomatoes in like containers and stuff, and you know, you don't have to have a big yard or anything to get into it. You just kind of need, you know, maybe a windowsill or a balcony just to, you know, try and grow some of your own vegetables. And you know, when the vegetables aren't doing well, don't take it personally, man. Just enjoy the process of, you know, trial and error. So
Cool. Well, thank you both for answering that. It sounds to me that there's a lot of hope for the bees, and people like both of you give me a lot of hope for the bees and just for, you know, our ecosystem in general. We have quite a few participants, so I want to open this part of the webinar up to any questions that anyone might have. So if you guys go down to the bottom of your screen, there are 3 little dots that say more. If you click on those, there should be a chat option. I think several of you have already found this chat option. So if any of you have any questions for John or Oscar, please feel free to put those in the chat now. I'll give you guys just a second so we can let some people type. Oh, it looks like maybe our Q&A has questions. Excuse me. Okay. Okay, so Gary asks, are there any perennials that you would recommend over others?
Personally, I love echinacea. I just think they're a beautiful purple flower, and you know, they put out a lot of pollen during the kind of the dearth periods. That's when other flowers aren't blooming as much. Goldenrod's another great late season, and poppies are pretty cool too. Those are good for early season.
Cool. Oscar, do you have anything to add to that?
Perennials.
So it doesn't come to my mind right now, but this year we purchased a lot of seeds like bee balm, echinacea, and I don't remember the other seeds that we bought. So I don't know exactly. I'm sorry, asters. It was sunflowers, but they're not perennial.
Bee balm's another great one, and I see hummingbirds go to that too, and that it's kind of a little bonus in there.
Awesome. Now we have a couple of questions about beeswax. One of the first, so maybe Oscar, you can speak to this. One of the questions is, what are there any health benefits to beeswax and beeswax candles?
Yeah. So the beeswax, I heard before, and I got Bob Beanie from Blue Ridge Honey, put it in and I think it's through the Association of Respiratory Things says, but I need to verify. But Bob Beanie says it's true. Then it's good for the asthma, but I don't know if it's correct. But I think it's good for the asthma. Well, supposedly they have positive ions and take the negative ions from the air and drop it down. So, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And then the other question here was, Oscar, do you specifically provide beeswax pellets to other beeswax candle brewers? And if so, someone is interested in buying beeswax pellets from you.
Yeah. Yeah, they can contact me. I have beeswax. So the beeswax that my hives produce is not a lot. So we purchased beeswax for another beekeeper in Wisconsin, and even from another beekeeper in Chicago. Is another beekeeper, and his name is Meadow. And I purchased some wax last year. And so we have some beeswax. If they want to buy, they can contact me, and for sure, yeah.
Great. And to remind you guys, that link to Oscar's website is in the chat right now. Another question we have is from Anonymous. There's a way of looking at the loss of bees that is super dismal and huge collapses of food systems, like Oscar mentioned about almonds, and this big trickle effect up the chain. Is this overly fearful, accurate? What do both of you think of this?
Can you explain me if it's fearful, if we can run bees or something like that? Is that
Sure.
question?
I guess I'm sorry if there's some more people in the coffee shop I'm in right now, so I'm sorry if it's a little noisy. I guess the question is asking, I think there is a rhetoric around the Save the Bees movement about that is very fearful and very, if we don't save the bees now, the planet will explode. I mean, obviously that's a hyperbole, but do you think that level of fear is accurate or maybe a little overblown? Which I think John sort of answered when he said, we need bees, so we're going to find an answer.
Yeah. If I so in California they have 1 million of acres of almonds, and they don't have native insects because the pesticide, and it's because it's a food desert for anything that is for the insects, because the almonds they bloom, I think, in March or 8th of March or something like that. It's close to end of February, close to March, for 10 days. But after that is nothing in 1 million of acres. So, and they after the pollination, they said to the beekeepers, get out here now because we're gonna start the pesticides. And if you don't get out, your bees are gonna die, and they pay a lot of money to bring those bees there. And a lot of beekeepers, they don't produce honey. They are pollinators. They make the money in the almonds. you know, and many do honey and do almonds. But what I'm saying is, if they don't get paid the amount of money to get there, they won't go there. In China, I think it's no, I don't know, remember the town, they produce apple pear. And you can Google it. They pollinate by hand the flowers because they have beekeepers there, but they get out from there because they put insecticides or to keep the pear nice and clean and beautiful for export. So the beekeepers get out of there, and the native bees are dead. So the people, they have to pollinate by hand. And like somebody says, I don't know who, but I don't remember who, but we cannot do that here. So, and like I said before, the planet is so big, it's so beautiful, but we finding like cases like China where they have to pollinate by hand, like almonds in California. Then if they don't have the honeybees, they don't have almonds. If an acre of almonds, they produce, I think, I don't remember, but 40 pounds of almonds without bees. But they produce 2,400 with a hive, with a couple hives there, an acre. So we have to try to keep it. We have to try to conserve the planet, because when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we have a couple more questions if you gentlemen are okay staying on for just a few minutes past 2 o'clock.
Sure. Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
I would say that agriculture is going to have to, adapt to a more integrated way and integrated pest management. So, less pesticides, more cover crop, less fertilizer, more cover crop kind of stuff. To help amend the soil. And the more diversity you have in a field, the more predators you're going to have for your pests, and the less out of whack it's going to get. So, but I think biodiversity is super key for agriculture moving forward.
Thank you both. Okay, the next question is, when native bees hibernate in the ground, how far down do they live, and is it usually aerated soil or solid soil?
I think
that depends on the species, but I would say anywhere from, just shooting 6 to, I'd imagine 18 inches, depending on the species, and wasps do that as well in kind of a cool way.
Oscar, anything to add to that?
I don't know the answer, but probably I saw a lot of videos where the bumblebee nest in a little hole, and it's beautiful. They come out, and my aunt, she's in Minnesota, and last week, a few days ago, she said she's waiting to do her garden because she's waiting to the temperature go raise to 50, because don't want to disturb the native pollinators. So she's waiting to the bees, to native pollinators to emerge from there. And yeah, so I don't know what's the size, but it's good to wait a little.
Mm-hmm. All right, this question, do you isolate new hives because of disease?
If I isolate the hives because of disease, thanks God, I didn't have diseases. The only disease I had is Varroa Mites, which is another insect. Is like John explained about the Varroa Mites. What I did last year, I treated with formic acid. It's like oxalic acid, but this formic is organic compound from the ants. The ants has formic acid, and I treated with that. But thanks God we don't have. I didn't have it yet. The big diseases than they like European fall brew. Then they need another treatment like antibiotics, but I didn't have it yet, and hopefully never. And American fall brood is you have to burn the beehive, but I didn't have it. My hives died for Varroa or for mismanagement.
Yeah. So we had some European foul brood pop up in our apiaries while I was at SynTech, and those weren't new hives, but you know, it's hard to say where it's coming from, if it's coming from, you know, those bees robbing out neighboring hives that are crashing, or if it's coming from packages. But yeah, anytime you suspect disease, it's definitely good to have kind of like an isolation apiary, or kind of like a quarantine spot. If you're wondering about packages, I think it's super smart to hit those with oxalic as soon as you hive them and before they start putting brood out. Because you know that gets your mite load down to hopefully 0, and then you're not, you know, introducing that into the apiaries. And if you do have a hive with like super high mite loads, like those images I was showing, it's probably not a bad idea to isolate, just because, you know, as those hives are crashing, the bees kind of know that it's time to bail and jump ship, and they'll start hopping into other hives and they'll take those mites with them.
That's super interesting. All right, our last question, and I know that this is from a beekeeper who I think needs a little advice. How do you make a queen? How do you make a queen bee?
You let the bees make the queen bee.
The queen is, and this is very nice, because the queens are regular egg, like a worker egg, but the difference between a worker and a queen. It was since the beginning, she got a special food. She got royal jelly, and that made her grow twice as big, and they made her, she can live years, and the worker just live like 6 weeks. So that's a very good example of about food. We need good food and clean food. You know, so how you make a queen is they just feed royal jelly to the larva, so when the queen put an egg, for 3 days it's gonna be an egg, and the next 3 days, and after 3 days, become a larva, and so it's very important to feed the larva royal jelly since the beginning, and the bees, they know which one is gonna be a queen. So the cells for the workers are, I don't know the dimensions, but they are smaller. The drones are a little bigger, the cells. The queen cell is a little bigger. So when that cell is bigger, they just, the royal jelly, they just, the young bees produce royal jelly. So the young bees, they have glands in the head, and they produce from royal jelly from those glands, which, if honey is a medicine, is a food, is a good food, royal jelly is a superfood, then make wonders with the queen. Right? I don't know if I answered.
No, that's a lot of, that's more information than I would have known. So that's great. You guys are the experts. Well, guys, thank you so much to both of you for giving up a little bit of your time and expertise for us today. We all really appreciate it. I know I learned a lot, and I definitely have some things to carry with me as a non-beekeeper on how to help raise awareness and help myself. Just to remind everyone, I just put in the link or in the chat a link to the Six Fest event tonight, Becoming God. That's going to be featuring a Nobel Prize nominated peace activist. And if you go to the sixthfest.org, which I am also putting in the chat right now, you can look at some of our other amazing events like the one you just saw. So Oscar, John, thank you so much. Best of luck, Oscar, to your hives. And thank you so much again for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Thank you,
And
Kathleen.
check out Bee-utiful honey and candles. And next time you need a present for somebody.
Thank you.
Right, everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, John. Thank you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, John.